A lot of people avoid decluttering because they think it has to be this huge, exhausting overhaul and undertaking. I know because that's exactly how I used to be about it. I need a whole weekend. I need more energy. I just need to be in the right mindset. As your internet bestie and decluttering big sis, no. You don't. What actually works is turning decluttering into a low energy, repeatable lifestyle instead of this big dramatic event. And so these are the things that I have started doing monthly that work in decluttering my whole life. Let's go. First up, I revisit things that I wasn't ready to let go of. When decluttering, you will run into some things that you just do not have the mental or emotional bandwidth to deal with. I've done this for a while now and I still have those things. And so every month I intentionally revisit physical things that I kept the last time that I decluttered. Not everything, not my whole house, just the things that felt emotionally complicated at the time. And you know the things that I'm talking about, the stuff that you touched and paused on or thought, I'm just not ready yet. Sometimes these are sentimental things. Sometimes it's clothes that I thought I'd wear again. Sometimes it is something tied to a version of me that feels cozy and familiar, even if I'm not fully living in that life anymore. A lot of people get stuck here because they think decluttering has to be final. And if you haven't even started yet, that feeling gets multiplied because now it's mixed with being overwhelmed and thinking about the sheer volume of things and decisions that you're going to have to make. So your brain steps in and says, this feels like too much. So let's go do not this. Let's go do something else. Here's the thing. Our nervous system is always trying to protect us, even from things that we don't actually need protecting from. It is really good at turning low-level stress into this mountain if it thinks that we're about to exhaust ourselves, which causes us to hesitate on things. The problem isn't the hesitation, but staying stuck there. This is where revisiting comes in and becomes so powerful. The goal here isn't to force decisions, but to normalize checking back in on a continual basis because you're teaching your brain that decluttering isn't dangerous. It's just a conversation. When you view it that way, you realize that readiness at different points changes. You notice how over time your perspective changes, and when you give yourself permission to revisit instead of decide everything all at once, the pressure to do it all perfectly just drops. Sometimes I look at something and I think, oh, this is easy now. Other times I keep it, but I keep it intentionally with this knowledge that I can and I will come back to it. Even if all you do is open a box and look at it and closing again, that still counts because even though you're not letting go of an object, you are rebuilding this trust with yourself and you're proving to your brain that you don't have to solve everything right now. You're allowed to take things in layers, and over time, that changes how you approach decluttering altogether. It stops feeling like this big high pressure event that you avoid, and it starts feeling like just this ongoing relationship with your space where you're allowed to change, you're allowed to grow and update your decisions as your life does. You don't have to force yourself to be ready. You just have to give yourself permission to check back in until you are. 2, I do a monthly time and commitment check-in. This is one that I did not fully connect to decluttering for a really long time. When people think about decluttering, they think about stuff. Closets, drawers, all of the things that we see that's taking up space. But I noticed that commitment and time clutter was one of the most overwhelming things in my life, even in seasons where there's been no concern about my home. I am someone who just has a lot going on. That is just my life. I'm juggling a lot of things, but I also really value slow living. And so I'm always figuring out how to make both of those things happen. And so to do that, I make sure to check in with my schedule to ask myself, what's helped me to have this soft productivity? What didn't? And what do I need to support the life that I want? These questions are game changers because I can pay attention to where I have felt rushed, where I keep squeezing things in, where I've agreed to things and immediately felt some internal heaviness. Sometimes it's obvious, like I just took on too much. Other times I have to dig a little bit deeper to find, like, maybe I didn't pad out my schedule with enough buffer room, so it made it feel like I was constantly on the go. Time clutter hides behind responsibility. A lot of us are capable people. We're dependable. We are the ones who handle things. So when life feels like a lot, our instinct isn't to remove things. It is to push harder. We tell ourselves, oh, this is just a busy season. I'll rest later. I can handle it. And maybe you can. but just because you can does not mean that you should. If this idea of decluttering every part of your life is still new, this part can feel really uncomfortable because it touches on identity, who you are for other people, what you have built your sense of worth around. Saying yes probably worked for you in the past. There could be a safety net around being busy, so letting that be questioned can feel a little bit threatening. But over busyness will always lead to burnout. So the idea is to purposefully create some level of time freedom. It doesn't mean that you will suddenly have less to do, but it means that you are being really intentional about moving out of autopilot and into choice, into decision. Sometimes my monthly check-ins lead to a very clear change, or maybe I tighten up my time around completing certain tasks. I reschedule something, or I decide that I am not available in the same way that I was before. Other times, there's really nothing that changes externally, but inside, I can feel that shift where I stop gaslighting myself about why I'm tired. I stop telling myself that I should be able to handle more. And I start respecting where I am, the energy that I have, instead of just trying to push through it. Even that is so freeing. When you see your time clearly, you stop feeling trapped inside of it and you realize that you have a whole lot more agency than you thought. Not in a way of controlling everything, but to decide what you're going to keep carrying. When your time isn't constantly overfilled, you have more patience, things get a whole lot more clear, you have a lot more emotional capacity to make decisions, even decisions about your physical stuff. So I want you to lock in with your schedule and start paying attention to how your time feels, not in a judgy way, not to fix it all at once, but just to notice, because you cannot create freedom in areas that you aren't paying attention to. Third, I reduce the noise coming into my mind. Another monthly thing I like to do is intentionally clean up my inputs. And when I say inputs, I'm talking about what I am letting into my mind on a regular basis, what I'm reading, what I'm scrolling past, what's constantly pulling at my attention in the background that I'm not fully aware of. This maybe should have been my first point because this is one of the easiest and most underrated places to start. You do not have to touch a single physical item. You don't have to make any big emotional decisions. You just have to notice how mental clutter is coming in. Mental clutter does not announce itself the way physical clutter does. There is no pile on the floor, no drawer that won't close, but instead it shows up as this low-level undercurrent of feeling behind or scattered or like you can't think clearly, even when you technically have time or even physical space. I have found myself many times saying, "Ugh, I do not know why I feel so overwhelmed. Nothing is actually wrong." And usually when I slow down and I look, it's never one big thing, but it is this constant input. Emails, social media, and other people's lives, news, and just the list goes on. You realize that you are constantly reacting to what is around you, making decisions based on what feels urgent instead of what actually matters. And something in your own life feels unsettled, even when you're doing fine. That's mental clutter. And so we want to constantly declutter our overloaded minds. Right around once a month, I will unsubscribe from emails that I never open, or I'll mute or unfollow accounts that just don't make me feel the way I want to feel. I will clear out digital clutter. Anything that's been a mental drain, I'll just take a look at it. And this isn't some big dramatic, like, today is my day to declutter my mind. No, it is just maintenance. My goal here isn't to cut everything out forever, but to create enough quiet so that I can hear myself think again. When the noise drops, even just a little bit, everything in me relaxes. My thoughts slow down and I feel like my mind can just like breathe again, if that makes sense. Now, did life suddenly get simple? No, but I'm no longer carrying everybody else's priorities in my head. And this doesn't mean that you have to completely stop scrolling or delete every app or take a few days to go live in the woods somewhere. You just have to be purposeful about when and why you're consuming something. And you have to decide, this serves me right now, or this doesn't. And when you do, it clears this mental and emotional space, which makes other things a whole lot easier. 4, I let go of one habit that doesn't fit this season. Habits are another one that don't look like clutter in the traditional sense, but they do take up as much space in your life as physical things, sometimes even more. We start the year or new seasons with a lot of goals and plans and things that we want to accomplish, but your habits determine whether or not you're ever going to get there. So every month I take an honest look at how I am moving through my days and ask, what are the habits that I've gotten into? Which ones help? which ones are holding me back? They can feel a bit uncomfortable to even ask because most of the time we already have a sense of what those answers are going to be. But those questions will bring up a lot. And it has helped me to notice what I am doing and how it's holding me back. Things like overworking or staying up too late or not moving when my life gets busy. For me, I notice that a lot of those habits aren't random. They are traps that I fall into when I don't have the capacity for a lot else. Capacity gets eaten up by stress and pressure and life. And when that happens, our brains default to whatever feels easiest in the moment, which means that things we easily fall into become automatic poor habits, and left unchecked, months down the line, I have completely gotten off track of what it was that I wanted to do. You have to figure out what those habits are for you, to name them and make a plan for how you are going to support yourself in those areas moving forward. This may mean figuring out what the replacement is for a non-productive habit. So say you recognize that you get in bed and you scroll for hours until you fall asleep. Maybe the replacement is reading or doing some type of analog hobby that is not this constant assault on your senses. Maybe it's putting guardrails around it where you can still do the thing that you like to do, but under specific parameters. So back to the hours of scrolling example. Say you notice that right after work, you come home and then you just kind of waste the rest of the evening zoning out. Putting guardrails can look like, well, I will give myself 30 minutes to scroll or to watch 2 shows after I've done XYZ. That way you can still do the thing, but it's not this black hole that stops you from doing other things that are also important to you. Sometimes it means just giving yourself support so that you don't keep falling into the same patterns out of exhaustion. A lot of us try to rely on sheer willpower when what we actually need is support. That could be having someone hold you accountable, or having a practice of journaling how you're doing, or putting in a reward system in place for yourself. Support is a good thing. Use it. Again, you have to figure out exactly what works for you, but when you stay on top of your habits, they become aligned with the life that you actually want to be living, instead of letting your lowest energy moments dictate the direction of your days, your months, your life. I decide what good enough is. This might be my favorite one of all because I am naturally a perfectionist girly at heart. And here I get to just let go of the idea that everything needs to be perfect. One of the biggest reasons that life clutter keeps coming back is because our definition of what's acceptable is perfect. That pressure to be perfect then sneaks into every single part of our lives, our homes, our schedules, our routines, our self-care. Like I said, everything. So once a month, I make a very intentional decision about what good enough actually is. Everything does not have to be amazing to be working. Some things just need to be maintained. Some things just need to be done. I remember when I was in my PhD program, that was something that my professor and other professors would say, is that a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And so I have really tried to take that into like every aspect of my life. So for example, I am a YouTuber and I have a business, but I also have a full-time career as a professor. So I cannot go full throttle with everything or I will burn myself out. So maybe that means that if I know that the next month at work is going to be business as usual, then I can launch something in my business. Or if I know that things at work are going to be crazy, then I am focused on ensuring that I'm not dropping the ball on my upload schedule or sending emails and responding to my comments. Like I said, I do this with all the areas of my life, and I ask questions like, is this actually a problem, or am I treating it like one because my standards are too high right now? Is this area working well enough for the season that I'm in? Am I trying to optimize something that just needs consistency? This matters so much because the perfection creep is real. You start feeling behind even when things are fine. You feel like clutter is everywhere. Even when it's actually manageable, you feel like you need this reset of your whole life, when actually what you need to do is give yourself permission to like live and let live. And sometimes that means deciding this routine doesn't need to be ideal. It just needs to support me. This habit doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be better than it was before. And I've noticed that when I do this, I stop stressing myself out. Light bulb. I stop stressing myself out. I can see things for what they actually are so that I'm not getting in this space of doing too much. When I am constantly trying to do too much at a really high level, that's when I get burned out. So deciding what good enough is becomes this act of self-care that protects my energy, which means that I can maintain and I can keep up with my life and not feel like I'm constantly drowning. So these are the 5 things that I do on a monthly basis. And the main point of this is that decluttering isn't something that you do to your life. It is something that you make a natural part of your life. It's not about tearing everything apart or about having the energy for some massive overhaul. And it's also not about doing things perfectly, but just about paying attention, noticing when things feel off or when something is no longer fitting your life and giving yourself permission to respond without all of the added drama. We ain't got time for drama. And so that's why I like to do this monthly instead of once a year, because when decluttering becomes a lifestyle, it stops draining you and it actually gives you your energy back. Maybe you've been sitting here thinking, I haven't even started yet. That's okay. The fact that you're noticing and that you're even drawn to this conversation means that you're ready to start moving. You don't need to do all 5 of these things at once. Just start somewhere. Pick one small place or one small habit, one small decision, and you will see how that momentum starts to build. Over time, what potentially started as just this simple decluttering project turns into something so much bigger, where you have more clarity, more peace, more freedom in how you live your whole life. So if one of these stood out to you today, let me know in the comments which one you are starting with. And if you want support doing this for your whole life in real life, not just watching videos and thinking about it, make sure that you're signed up for my email list. I send out weekly encouragement and ways to connect more if that is something that you feel like you need. All right, my friends, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody else who might need it. Also, if you're not subscribed, well, what are you doing? I'm gonna need you to jump on that. You already know. I love you so much, and I will see you in my next. Bye for now.